Is the last day of September. I cannot believe it's the last day of September. Tomorrow is October. Time is moving in a very weird way ever since pretty much COVID. So here we are. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today at Secular AZ. We are a 501c3 organization focused on protecting the Constitution and the separation of church and state for over a decade. We've got some great programming, including a series of candidate forums that happen Wednesday evenings. Unfortunately, our candidate forum for next Wednesday has been canceled. These candidates are very busy, and Martin Quesada, who is going to be joining us, was double booked. So hopefully, we'll get to hear from him after Election Day, and he can talk about the morality of money and the state treasurer's race. But next Friday, October 7th at noon, we will be talking to history professor Seth Kotler, and we have been doing a series of events about fixing the framers' failures, about the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. These are happening in a hybrid session. For those of you who might be watching, yes, we realize that we have had some technical difficulties with those, but that is kind of the, what happens when you have these hybrid events. So thanks for hanging in there. We've got some great events, and I hope you will consider donating to our organization, becoming a member, perhaps buying one of our I Read Banned Books shirts. That law, HB 2495, will be going into effect tomorrow, where basically you can't let a child read about sex in any shape or form unless you have explicit parent permission. So if you'd like one of these shirts, by all means, go to our website, secularaz.org. But today I'm really excited because we are talking with a representative from an organization called Uncage and Reunite. And I'm really excited to hear about the work that they do. Joining us today is Carolyn O'Connor. She worked 30 years with Maricopa County Community Colleges, starting with Mesa Community College and ending her career as vice president of Gateway Community College. So many of my former students went to Gateway Community College and had an absolutely wonderful experience there. I love Gateway Community College.
Yeah, I did too.
And the fact that they can get the dual enrollment, have an associate's degree when they graduate from high school. And some of my best and brightest students ended up going to Gateway, and many of them were undocumented. After Carolyn retired, fighting for the rights of Daca students, migrants, and asylum seekers became her passion. She was the chair of East Valley Patriots for Social Justice. It's so funny too, Carolyn, when I saw that name, because the term patriot has been kind of co-opted.
I know, it turns everybody off, but we did that deliberately. So
good. So yeah, she was chair of East Valley Patriots for Social Justice, where she traveled around the state promoting the Arizona Accord, which were guiding principles for immigration reform. She's also a member of Catholic Coalition for Migrant Justice and currently serves as co-chair for Uncage and Reunite Families Coalition. So welcome, Carolyn. I'm so glad that you're here today. Is there anything that I left out of your bio that you'd like to add?
No, but I'm so glad you mentioned my work with the DACA students, and that's how I got involved in the immigration issues. But I'll do a plug for our ACE program, Achieving College Education. You talked about the dual enrollment. And so after a student completes their sophomore year, they spend the summer at Gateway. By the time they graduate, they can have 18 credits, and many of those students were undocumented. It was a scholarship program set up specifically for undocumented students because, as you know, they can't take advantage of Pell programs or anything like that. So
yeah, you know what, I want to give I had one student, Martin Gonzalez is his name. He was a student at Gateway College, and then he went on to ASU, and he got a degree in, something in the film industry. And he actually made a short documentary film that was called something about the undocumented states of America, because that's his family's experience. And it's this great short documentary that actually was entered into some awards programs, nominated for various awards. And so the work that you did at Gateway, it lasts a legacy. And
I was so privileged to work with the DACA students and their families. I mean, they were incredible. They're so outstanding. So that's how I originally got involved in immigration issues. Uncage and Reunite Families Coalition was an organization that was formed a couple of years ago when children were being separated from their families at the border. And so our mission is to help reunite the migrant children with their families and to be advocates for safe and humane treatment of migrants at the border. So with that, that's how we volunteer at the Welcome Center. I don't know if you're familiar with the Welcome Center, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. Originally, ICE was dropping people off at migrants at the bus stations and not telling any people in over 100-degree heat. And so volunteers would go pick them up and take them where they were going to go. The bus station won't let them in unless they have tickets, which many were flying out, not taking a bus. And then only 2 hours before. So a couple of International Rescue Committee got together with other organizations and formed the Welcome Center. So the Welcome Center is ICE drops off the migrants at the Welcome Center. They can come in, they're medically checked. They're given, they can take showers, they can get clothes off when they arrive with just clothes on their back. And so, and then they get a hot meal, some clothing that they need, and then there's a bus to take them to the plane or the bus station, wherever they're going to go, to their sponsors or their families. And that's how we first came aware of the issue. Is we were volunteering at the Welcome Center, and a woman stopped me and asked me if she could have a bag or something to put her possessions in. And I said, well, we have backpacks in the Roper room. And she said, they're all gone. And she said, I had a brand new backpack, but the Border Patrol took it and everything in it. And then the man next to her said, the same thing happened to me. Not only that, but they took my brand new jacket and my shoes. So we started asking around, and we saw these people coming in with plastic bags. So we started doing some research and got in contact with our contacts at the Yuma border. And advocates had said that the Border Patrol agents in Yuma are forcing migrants asylums to discard the majority of their belongings before they are processed through the station. And they're just told to drop their backpacks. Now, many of the migrants forgot they had their passports in the backpacks. The backpacks were just tossed in the trash. And they are handed a small plastic bag and told to put their belongings in that. The majority present themselves coming through Yuma right now are coming from Cuba, Colombia, Peru, India, Venezuela, and Russia. Advocates have found passports, birth certificates, Bibles, rosary beads, pictures, diaper bags, shoes, coats, jewelry, and even medication. And one even found an X-ray of a young boy with a spinal problem, something that he probably needed to get attention in the US. Another said he was forced to discard his father's ashes. Another said he was forced to discard a prayer rug that had been in his family for 100 years. Fortunately, a volunteer saw this, so he took the prayer rug and got the migrant's name and address and was able to send it to him. Some of the items have monetary value, like the cash, the jewelry, the mobile phones. Some are sentimental, like photos, children's stuffed animals, and dolls. Some are important for health and well-being, like prescriptions and medication. And some are essential for navigating daily life in a US-based asylum seeker, like identity documents, proof of persecution, and vital phone numbers. Another mother coming from Mexico said her son's birth certificate showed him as a minor born in Nicaragua. The Border Patrol didn't believe her, told she was lying, that her son was really an adult, and tore up his birth certificate. Some refugees reported even ripped up Mexican immigration visas and other documents, claiming they were fake when in fact they were authentic. One woman reported confiscating her cell phone, and now she has no way to get in contact with her family. How many of us know phone numbers in our head like the old days? With that, our cell phones would be lost. Border Patrol agents reportedly have confiscated asylum seekers' turbans without returning or replacing them. Many Sikh migrants arrive in the US seeking asylum because they've been religiously persecuted in India. They honor their faith by keeping uncut hair and beards, as well as turbans to cover their hair, among other sacred practices. So you can imagine how traumatic this is. The Welcome Center now has provided turbans to Sikhs when they come. When we made inquiries in ICE, why are you doing this? Why are you trashing everything. Why are you treating the migrants like this? Their comment was, we don't have the time or the staff to go through the backpacks. Now, you could understand they have to go through the backpacks to make sure they're not transporting things they shouldn't be, but they just said we don't have the time and we don't have the staff, so we just throw them away. And sometimes some of them will give them a ticket to come back in 30 days to get their possessions if they put them in another place. Well, they're going to all places all over the country. There's no way they could return. In June, Diane Post, an attorney with Uncage and Reunite, sent a letter to Yuma Sector Border Chief Clem and Ty Johnson, acting director of ICE, as well as to Arizona congressional people, citing that forced abandonment of migrants' belongings violates their rights. Uncage did send a copy of the letter to Senator Kelly. We were really disappointed when Senator Kelly, who we support, visited the border and questioned them, and they told them it's all taken care of. And so, despite to say we have forwarded these their responses to our letter, the response to the letter that Diane wrote, the Border Patrol takes all allegations against detainees seriously. We have forwarded these allegations to the proper entities via the Joint Center for Further Investigation. Have we heard back? No, nothing. Despite his promises in August that the agency, despite the chief's promises in August that the agency would investigate the violations, they continue. The National Sikh Coalition and ACLU of Arizona said they are aware of new cases of turban confiscation this month. The Sikh Coalition and ACLU also said that interim guidelines and new policies have been set in place. When they asked to see a copy of it, they said no. These incidents are not taking place just at the Yuma sector. They're happening all along the Southwest border, and with varying degrees of intensity and varying degrees of disclosure and transparency. So getting to see the bottom of it, getting to get the crux of the problem is almost impossible. By the time asylum seekers arrive at our borders, they have raised hundreds, if not thousands, they have traveled hundreds, if not thousands of miles to escape violence and persecution. They should be treated, Border Patrol should be taking special care and not compound their trauma. One of the lawyers in Florence told a story about a migrant he was working with that was seeking asylum. He said he brought a 500-page document with him, wrapped carefully in plastic, and carried this instead of a lot of personal items to prove why he needed asylum. He said, in this day and age, if he would have been passed through the Yuma border, it would have been confiscated and gone. And as it was, he was able to prove his case and stay here. Representative Grajal, along with Representative Castro of Texas, put together a committee and sent a letter to U.S. Customs Border Chief. And it said in part, we are greatly alarmed by continuing reports that people are being indiscriminately forced to give up religious items and other past possessions, which are then trashed. In many cases, according to multiple entities working directly with Sikh migrants, communications and cooperation with Border Patrol officials specific to this issue has been difficult and making it even more urgent to address the situation. You know, when Ukrainians had to flee their country to surrounding countries, and countries who had much less resources than the United States, they were met with kindness, they were places to stay, and versus when migrants come to our border, they're met with armed guards carrying guns and they're treated with hostility. So Uncage and Reunite did a press conference a couple of weeks ago because we wanted to get the word out that was happening. People didn't know this was happening. And the Arizona Republic put a front page article right after our press conference, put a front page article describing exactly what was happening at the border. So we did get some, but at that press conference, we made a video to demonstrate and show people what's actually happening at the border. So if you could show that video now, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, Lindsay is going to handle the video for us. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Here it comes. States, their first encounter is with U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. This encounter can result in deportation or, more rarely, in the ability to enter the U.S. and make a case for asylum. In the Yuma border sector, rather than humanity, refugees are met with cruelty. After traveling thousands of miles through conditions we can't even imagine to get to safety, Yuma Border Patrol is violating law and policy by forcing refugees to give up their belongings. Sometimes the items are confiscated, and sometimes the refugee is forced to simply leave them at the border to become trash. Whether the refugee is then deported or makes their way to a sponsor in the U.S., they often no longer have their cell phones, medications, and identification. This makes them an easy target for extortion, violence, and human trafficking. Should the refugee intend to seek asylum, they no longer have the documentation that will be needed to prove their case. This presentation is provided by the Uncage and Reunite Families Coalition, the group of community activists, religious leaders, and others advocating for justice and working for the humane and legal treatment of children and families at the U.S. border since 2018. This quote from Pedro is the testimony of a migrant from southern Mexico traveling with his wife, fleeing government corruption and hoping to reunite with their U.S. citizen children.
Once they turned themselves in to Border Patrol, the agents took their belongings and threw away their suitcase with clothing and medicine in their wallets. They tried to ask for asylum, but U.S. officials ignored them and expelled them back to Mexico the next day.
A life cannot be reduced to a tiny plastic bag. None of the items confiscated and trashed pose any threat to the Border Patrol agents, yet the lack of the items can pose a significant hardship and danger to the refugee. Judges demand documentation to verify an asylum claim. Police reports, photos, identification, and even medical records can be necessary items. Religious articles are often the only source of solace for an immigrant in a foreign land. For what purpose are they not allowed? Medical records are necessary not only for an individual's health, but often to establish an asylum claim. The lack of clothing, shoes, and hygiene items presents an economic burden to the support community. Volunteers report heartbreaking stories of loss. These actions are not only morally reprehensible, they are illegal. Border Patrol should safeguard identification documents, not trash them. That in itself is a crime. How does a 6-year-old's back x-ray harm an officer? What could possibly be the reason to confiscate or trash medical records? Arizona law is being violated. After years of complaints from aid groups, in 2015, national standards for Border Patrol were created. Long-established laws are also being violated. International law is intended to lay the groundwork for humane and humanitarian treatment of migrants. This Instagram post was posted on Earth Day this past April. It is particularly underhanded in that the very victims of their treatment are blamed by Border Patrol for creating a trash problem. Like most bullies, the Border Patrol blames its misdeeds on others. In June of this year, Uncage and Reunite Families Coalition submitted a list of complaints and recommendations to Border Patrol and other appointed and elected officials. The Yuma Border Patrol agents need to follow existing policy, and management needs to ensure that they do so. We must not let Border Patrol get away with this mistreatment, and we must hold our governmental agencies accountable. If you want to make a difference, please call and write to your senators and to Border Patrol. Make them aware of the problem and insist that they take action immediately to remedy it. These are some of the relinquished items discovered by volunteers at our southern border. This behavior attacks the most vulnerable: children, those fleeing violence, and those targeted by gangs. Like the janitor, it is often the everyday person not those in high places who carry on the American ideals of liberty and justice for all.
So, well, I want to be able to say again to folks who are here, if you do have any questions for Carolyn, by all means. So I'm just kind of, I knew about all this, but not the specific items.
So
Yeah.
what we are asking is, you're welcome to show this, if you can pass it on to your members, to show this to any of your groups, organizations, churches, or whatever, and ask them. The only way we're going to get them to stop doing what they're doing is to embarrass them. So rules and policies don't seem to apply to them. And so we're asking that you write the senators, you write the Border Patrol chief, the head of ICE. We got give you the information on the slide there. So ask people to show it any place you want, get the word out, and ask people to please call or write these people. And we also have a Spanish version of it too.
So you talked earlier about, a center, is that right? Like a place where,
yeah,
the Welcome Center. So I remember back in, I think it was like 2018, 2019, where, there were various churches that were stepping up to help.
they still are, yeah.
Okay.
In addition to the Welcome Center, we have several of the churches stepping up and are doing the same thing. They welcome the migrants, and we've had people stop us in the hallway and thank us and say, I'm gonna get a little teary-eyed, say, this is the first time anybody treated us with any type of kindness or humanity. And they'd come up and they'd say, thank you for the food. Salvation Army provides not Salvation Army, St. Vincent de Paul supplies the hot meals for them. And then we have different organizations that will give us some foods, like Waste Not brings a lot of food to us, sandwiches and that. But St. Vincent de Paul provides the hot meals. And actually it was St. Vincent de Paul that set up a blueprint for the Welcome Center when we were trying to work with the city of Phoenix to get a centralized processing place. St. Vincent de Paul stepped up. They have a beautiful campus. And so they set up, they had an intake area, and they did exactly what the Welcome Center is doing now. So they set up a really good blueprint for us.
I remember, so from 2012 to 2020, I actually was on the Creighton School Board, and one of my fellow board members, whose term I believe is ending this year, he is a pastor of a church on 32nd Street and like Thomas area.
Yes, we know that church. Yes, we
Pastor Campos. Yeah,
yes.
He was a great board member. And I just remember the sheer exhaustion, I think that the migrants would come in, the asylum seekers would come in on Monday. And then it was, we had people who could speak various languages, which is no easy feat. And, they came in with no shoelaces. They would, confiscate their shoelaces. So he rallied the whole community, got donations. I was blown away by the number of people who stepped up to either donate, whether it was clothing or food. The food that, this is the first warm meal, because we would then take the little packet that they were given by Border Patrol or whoever, which was like a sandwich with a tiny bit of peanut butter. Yeah, maybe an apple and something like maybe a Capri Sun. And then the gratitude from these people who were escaping situations that none of us probably on this side of the border could even fathom. People who were exiled because of their political beliefs, people who were targeted because of the cartels and whatnot. They were just so grateful, and for him it was overwhelming. In fact, he was targeted by the Arizona Patriot movement or whatever they are, that Jennifer Harrison woman. He had it was the stuff of, you know, from the civil rights movement. He had people throwing bricks through his own personal home, like the window of his home. His children were being targeted online. He was being called all kinds of horrible things. One of these patriot people showed up at his church with a weapon, with a gun holstered, saying, I have the, you know, I have the concealed carry permit or whatever, I don't know, you know, and he's had to stand up to these bullies. In fact, I think he was even the kind of head of the lawsuit against that discrimination. But it's just so bizarre to me to think about these folks who are going through, again, like the worst thing that any of us could probably think of, and to be met with that kind of animosity. It's just mind-boggling to me. And now the fact that, you know, you're saying that, you know, these laws and these policies are being violated, I'm curious. Okay, so I'm thinking about the county of Yuma. Does this have to do with maybe the sheriff's office, or, you know, who's got jurisdiction to allow these kinds of infractions to go on without any?
It's a federal issue, and it's ICE and Border Patrol, not the sheriff or anything in Yuma, but Pastor Campos is still doing that work, as are some of the other churches. And the same thing happened to one of the churches in Mesa. They showed up carrying armed guards. The police in Mesa are very supportive of us. So but they show up at our press conferences with their megaphones, and you know, we see them. And that you're right, it's an open carry state, so they always carry guns. And the other thing, like some of our members have worked with Pastor Campos because FEMA does have some reimbursement funds for cheap, but the paperwork is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And it just adds another burden to pastors that are providing these services. So some of the members that we have worked with FEMA and asked them to kind of streamline the system in that. And there's always a delay in it. And now we have the busing issue, and Ducey spent $3 million so far busing migrants to New York, DC, and with another $15 million in the budget to continue this program. Now, he says he's doing it to help the NGOs and to help migrants. It's $2,200 per person. So we sent the governor an email and said, if you truly want to help the migrants, use the money other ways. Give it to the churches that are providing these services. Give it to the Welcome Center that are providing these services. There's a much more better way to use that money than to bus people maybe where they don't want to go. He says it's voluntary, but we're hearing otherwise.
Right. And we've also learned that, you know, there were a lot of lies that were being sold to these folks, whether it was DeSantis or Abbott or Ducey, you know, making all of these promises. There was actually a really good piece on NPR this past weekend on the Code Switch podcast. I don't know if you listened to it, but it was, you know, they were talking about they were comparing the reverse freedom rides from like the 1960s, where some of these segregationists in the South would bus people to the North, that, you know, in these northern areas, in affluent areas, and how it completely, you know, all the lies that they told. And there were so many similarities. It was very disturbing to me, although unfortunately not surprising.
You know, it's like they invent a crisis. It's like when they started dropping migrants off at different places, and that it was to really overwhelm us. But the volunteers, like you said, they're incredible. They came up, they stepped up to the plate, they provided services. And even when the migrants are being bused in Martha's Vineyard, New York, Chicago, and volunteers stepped up to the plate. If they really wanted to, they're inventing a crisis where there doesn't need to be a crisis. And DeSantis is, that's not even a border state, but the policy that it's all being challenged. So it's all being, and as is, we have, with the letter that we wrote to the Department of Justice, we're asking for an investigation into the busing issue. So there are some people that are demanding investigations into this, like Bravo is demanding an investigation into the possessions being taken at the border. I don't know. It's like they go from taking children at the border to Title 42 to remain in Mexico. What else can they think of? What else can they do? Here's the interesting issue. Asylum seekers are in this country legally. They're not illegal. They're here legally. They've been vetted. They begin with a court date, and they can remain in this country legally until they have their court date. And we have a process in place for asylum seekers. Originally, the process was you go to the border, you ask for asylum, you show proof or whatever, you get vetted, they give you a court date, and normally they release you to the United States to support it to family or sponsors. But under Title 42 and remain in Mexico, they haven't followed that. And so here
And
we are.
it reminds me, you mentioned Diane Post earlier, and we talk about it frequently during the legislative session, and when she helps us put together our legislative updates during the session, it's like, here we are, solving for a problem that doesn't exist. We're creating solutions for problems that don't exist. And it's manufactured, and it's at this point just cruel, But I appreciate you and the work that you do. Let's see, what is your website, just so we can make sure that we share it? I'm not really seeing any questions in the Q&A. Again, if you do have a question, anybody in attendance, whether it's on our webinar or on Facebook, please go ahead and post them. Otherwise, let's go ahead. And I know that we've already shared the video, but what's the website so that if people do want to learn more? I saw that the last screen, you had the number and address and all that for elected officials who we can contact. So I'm sure it's all condensed in your website. What's that?
Well, you can give me a call. We're having problems with our website right now, but you can email me at O'Connor, OCONNOR, at uncageandreunite.com.
Okay, say that
and
again.
You know what? If you could,
she's got it. Okay.
O'Connor at uncageandreunite.com.
Okay.
And perhaps you could put the clip up in the website too.
Yes.
People to do that, and then that gives them the information too that they have.
Yep, we've got that as well. So a quick question, how many, asylum seekers are we seeing come in? And you may have said this, or it may have been on the video, but I missed it. How many would you say are coming in every day?
The Welcome Center was seeing like 6,000 a month. Now we know they're going to other places in that, so I don't have a number of how many are coming in across every day, but the Welcome Center was seeing like 6,000 a month, and then the churches were seeing people too. But I'll see if I can get that number for you, and I'll email it to you.
Sure. And are there donation items that, like in addition to, because I mean, the most effective way here is going to be to reach out to your elected officials and those in power, but are there specific items that
what the Welcome Center can use is clothing, and the clothing should be like jeans and shirts and sneakers and children's clothes and backpacks, and of course they can use donations too, money donations. And the Welcome Center does have a website, so you can pull them up and they'll give you a list of what they need.
And as you said, these are folks who already have a sponsor in the United States lined up for them. This is entirely legal. They have a legal right to be coming to our country. They have somebody to vouch for them. There is a question from, and again, I don't know if it's Jean or Jeannie Devine. She asks, how is Mexico coping with the large number of immigrants at the border?
They're not. They're, although Title 42 has been lifted, we still haven't seen. And Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, does have a plan in place when we see these large numbers coming over. And, but right now, for 2 years, people in Mexico, and it was an agreement with the Mexican president done under the previous administration, the shelters were overrun there. So Rescue Aid does have, Rescue Aid is another organization that takes donations, and they also have a website. And they take donations across the border to Mexico, food, clothing, and that. We have people living to some of the shelters here that are overrun. We have people living in tents on the streets. They're being, some have been kidnapped, abused. It's awful.
Yeah, I remember, I obviously listen to a lot of NPR, but there's also the podcast on Saturdays, This American Life. And this was actually like a year or two ago, but Ira Glass on This American Life was doing a whole series of the experience of the folks who were there, sometimes living for months, even over a year.
Well, it's been 2 years since the previous administration was able to implement Title 42 because of COVID, but it was, and I think that violates international and some of our laws, because again, we had a policy in place for asylum seekers. I think they should give the Statue of Liberty back, because what it says on the Statue of Liberty, 70 you're poor, you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, in today's climate in the United States, it's there's not a lot of compassion. There seems to be an empathy deficit, and people have become so divided. In fact, when I go, talking to voters about, what issues are important to them, oftentimes they will bring up immigration because they're seeing it, right? They're seeing these clips on Fox News, or, politicians are posting, this much fentanyl was seized at the border or whatever. And so I think that people have a perception of what the border is really like, as opposed to what it really is, and the kinds of people who are coming over. I mean, well, the former president, he started off his campaign by disparaging our neighbors to the south and kind of painting, the citizens of those countries with this very broad brush of them being criminals, et cetera. And a lot of people have bought into that. But when I'm able to have a personal conversation with somebody and able to share the stories of my former students who did come to this country because they were, being persecuted politically, or they were, their children were being targeted by, some of these cartels and other groups who just want to destroy what's happening. I mean, like all of us, I think I'm a mother. If I felt like the only way that I could keep my children safe was to bring them to a country, and I had the sponsorship to be able to do it, I mean, I think all of us would do it. And we seem to not be very good at remembering our shared humanity these days.
Or remembering that this country was built on the backs of immigrants.
Right. And that's it, and all these other laws that we talk about on a regular basis about not wanting to share the true story of our nation's history, or, that we want to box certain people out and charge them international tuition fees, and kind of to paint this other as some scary person, when really we're all just human beings. We're all just human beings floating on a rock that's hurtling through space. And we should at least try to be kind to each other for the very short amount of time that we're here. And it's disheartening, but it's really heartening that there are groups like yours and somebody who's dedicated their entire life to public service. Carolyn, I'm just so impressed by you, and I'm so grateful for the work that you do.
Well, I appreciate it. And another area that I put a plug to for, we still haven't solved the Daca issue. I mean, these are children who were brought to this country when they were 3 or 4, and that issue goes back and forth. It had bipartisan support at one time, and we're still dealing with it. These students were so incredible, and they wanted a college education. Their parents want them to get a college education, and they want to get back to their community. They want to be social workers, doctors, lawyers. They even want to serve in the military. and they graduate from college and they can't do anything. Now, well, if the DACA status gave, well, at least they can get a job, but we're still dealing with that issue. That shouldn't even be on the table. That's a no-brainer.
Right, our best and our brightest are being held captive by the
Exactly.
uncertainty and the just constant trauma. I've had so many students who had family members who are undocumented, and the mental toll that it takes on these families, not knowing if there is going to be a raid at their workplace. I was teaching when Sheriff Joe Arpaio was still in office, and I remember the days where he would literally park his MCSO bus across from our school, and we would literally have 50% attendance on those days. Our families were absolutely traumatized, and they were business owners themselves, or they worked 2 and 3 jobs. They paid taxes that they don't get any benefits from.
I know.
And they're oftentimes, the kindest, hardest working people that would give you the shirt off of their back. And again, I just wish that we could get to a point where we could all remember our shared humanity instead of this crazy kind of, I'm going to just take whatever's mine. I'm going to demonize you because you don't look like me, and I'm going to make your life a living hell. It just doesn't make sense.
And there's a bill that's going to be on the ballot. I think it's Prop 307 to allow these students to pay in-state tuition. Give them it's when we went before the Senate and said, they were telling us that, well, we can't afford that. Well, if they pay in-state tuition, they're covering the cost of what the education is. If they don't come to school, they're not contributing anything. But out-of-state tuition is 4 times the cost of in-state.
And that is Prop 308.
I think it's 308. So
yeah. It allows students who graduated from high school after attending for at least 2 years to pay in-state tuition at Arizona State universities or community colleges. Yeah. So, my recommendation would be, to support that. We are a nonpartisan organization, but I think that, our humanity should go first. So anyway, Carolyn, I just want to say thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, wait, hold on just a second. Another question coming in. How are immigration and DACA policies changed? Is it the federal or state level? Do we need to put pressure on U.S. Senate and representatives and or state representatives? That's a good question.
Yes to all of the above. We need comprehensive immigration reform. We have been requesting that for probably before I got here, but we have been requesting it for the last 40 years. And it goes on both sides with Republicans or Democrats. We need comprehensive immigration reform, put pressure on our senators, put pressure on the president, put pressure on Mayorkas, Homeland Security, and all our representatives. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time today. Thank you to everybody else for joining us today. Nothing's happening next Wednesday. Unfortunately, our programming has been canceled, but next Friday, we will be speaking to a history professor. I can't remember his name right now, but we look forward to seeing you all then. I hope everybody has a great weekend. And please go and support Uncage and Reunite and the good work that they do.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Bye, everybody. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.